Shalom, everybody. Welcome to the Midrash portion of Reunion Roadmap. This is David Jones. With me today is Barry Phillips. Shalom, brother.
Shalom, David.
Got an interesting question. I've been kind of reflecting a little bit on the life of Yaakov and how his life is very prophetic for what we see for the nation of Israel as a whole, and also looking to even the restoration that Bnei Yosef is working within, bringing all Israel, here we're looking in Bnei Yosef, North America, all Israel to come together to try to be reconciled with one another, with the Father, and with Israel as a whole is ultimately the goal that we're looking at, and trying to work within the framework of what the Father has given us. But if we look at the life of Yaakov, there is a lot of prophecy involved in his life that we can look at to the history of Israel, and even down to the things that we're looking in and for life for us today. And we know, obviously, Yaakov, his name was changed to Israel, and Israel had the 12 sons, which become the 12 tribes. Okay. So with that, I kind of want to start with the idea of the blessing that was given to Yaakov. Now, you know the story, and not to go fully into the story, but Yaakov and Esau, Jacob and Esau, brothers that were at odds even in the womb and from the time they came out. And Rivka was told that the older will serve the younger. So this is one who, in her mind, would end up with the birthright. Isaac, who later on in life calls out for Esau, says, why don't you go out and fetch me some game that you really like and or that you're really good at getting and that I really love to eat, and go get it and fix it for me so that I can bless you before I die. My thinking, this was a little bit dramatic, because we know he lived at least another 20 years after that. and so yes, at least. So Yaakov at the telling of his mother and saying, well, let's go in this, and you need to get this blessing from your dad, kind of thing. So not going into all of that, but he goes in, and in my opinion, he was getting a blessing, not necessarily the birthright promise that was to be given, because we do see that being given to Jacob as before he leaves the land. So what happens here is, because of that incident with Jacob and Esau and their father, and he ends up with the blessing that was by his father intended for Esau, his brother now seeks to kill him. I think he was just kind of looking for an excuse. So mom goes to dad and says, hey, our son needs to find a bride, and it would just do me in if he took a bride from this land where we're at. So let's send him back to my family and see if he can get a bride there. And of course, Esau, hearing this, goes out and gets a bride from the area. But he says, okay, so he goes to send his son away from the land that was promised to them, away from these things, and he blesses him and sends him off. And this is kind of weird, if you ask me, because it's kind of a picture of, okay, he's in the land, and he's being sent outside of the land to get a bride. And he's going from Beersheba, traveling toward Haran. So if you look at this on the negative side, he's being exiled right after he was blessed. So it's like, because of this blessing, he's being kicked out of home. Mm-hmm. What a blessing, right? But on the other side of it, it is in this exile, the way I'm phrasing it here, that he's going to build his family, that he's going to get a bride, that he's going to become a family that what would be called Israel. So in exile, Jacob becomes a family. And further, when he goes to return, he becomes Israel. Interesting phrasing of these things, because when he goes to return, we know the story after he works for Lavan. 20 years later, we're looking at, he's returning home, and he comes across two camps, Machanaim, and he has angels there. And he sends messengers, translates as angels. He sends them to Esau to kind of let him know, to kind of check him out and fill out the situation and say, hey, your brother's coming to meet you and he's got a bunch of great stuff for you,
Yeah.
And they go back, they go back to Jacob and tells him, Esau's coming to kill you, man. He's got 400 guys with him. So now what's he going to do? Well, his reaction, he kind of takes a multi-pronged attack here. He divides his family into two groups. He sends messengers ahead of him. He sends gifts ahead of him, and ultimately, after all of this has gone before, then he comes to meet Esau, and whatever the outcome is, whether it be a peace or war, at that point, that's what it's going to be. So he takes the approach of, okay, I'm going to send this stuff ahead, and I'm going to pray. So he sends this stuff ahead and he goes to pray, but in the process of all this, he splits his family into two camps. And so it was an interesting picture that I was getting here. So he's in exile. He becomes a family. And as he is in exile, he turns back towards home. But as he turns back towards home, he is now split into two groups, two camps. And they won't really be reconciled again until they get into the land. And I think that's very prophetic of Israel as a nation, as a whole, and even talking about the things we're looking at today. Rashi put it this way, that God gave Jacob two promises. One, I will guard you wherever you go. And two, return you to the land of your forefathers, to your birthplace, and I will be with you. And with this promise, though Israel is split in two, he will return and be one again. And I think that before he wrestles with the man, which I, again, believe to be Yeshua, as he wrestles with the angel of the Lord here, this is all a picture of his character being changed, his life being changed, and the heart of the Father is to be reassembled to one family back inside the land. Even though we see we're divided, we're maybe dispersed, but at some point we all turn our hearts and our attitudes back to home. And as we're going there, though we may struggle, we're following following Yeshua in our return. And so that is going to help us to become one on the other side. Though, even if you look at Jacob and Esau as two different natures that dwell within you, as we come to that, we overcome the Esau nature, so to speak, to become Israel. And so there's a few many different directions that we can go with this. But before I go too deep down a rabbit hole in one certain direction, Barry, what kind of input and thoughts do you have on this subject?
Well, I'm thinking of Bereshit or Genesis 28, where Yaakov is initiating his exile, and he comes upon Hamakom. He comes upon the place, sees the stairway or the ladder to the heavens, and Yah says to him, I am Yahweh Elohim of Abraham, your father, Elohim of Yitzhak. Doesn't say he's Yaakov's Elohim yet. And he said, the land I give to you, your line, I give it to you and to your seed. That's the Bekira. That's the promise of the covenant promise of the land and continuing the seed. That is the seed of the Messiah, the seed of the woman that goes all the way back to chapter 3, verse 15. Only Yah can give that blessing. He gave it to Abraham. He gave it to Yitzhak. Now he's giving it to Yaakov.
Right.
And he says that his seed is going to be like the dust of the earth. It's going to break all in four directions, the clans of the earth. It's going to be blessed in you and in your seed. I'm going to be with you wherever you go, bring you back to this land. For he says, I'm not going to leave you until I have done what I've spoken to you. So there is this covenant promise of continuance with him. Yah has not given up on the process. We see the house of Israel, Ephraim, if you will, all the clans and varieties that we represent ourselves at, not just in the U.S., but the world abroad. And all the varieties and little quirks that we all have, the differences of interpretations and observances, Yah sees us as a collective, as a whole. All of these sons that he and his wives have, they were not all the same. With 4 different wives, they all perhaps look different. When you think about the servant girls that were given as wives, who knows what nationality they were? The sons of Yaakov and Leah and Yaakov and Rachel very much would have looked similar, being of the same families. But then you have these other varieties. So when you put all the sons together, they could have been different skin colors and hair colors and
Right.
Dramatic differences in features. You think of Joseph's coat of many colors. It suggests that our Messiah is the Messiah of a large variety of ethnicities and peoples. The idea that, David, that we're going to be so similar that we immediately recognize each other may be a fallacy. We try to fit each other in our own little boxes of acceptance. And we have to get rid of our box and take on Yeshua's box instead, because it's a much larger box.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure that when we get into the kingdom, we may look around and see someone and think to ourselves, how did they get in here? I would have not included them, not realizing that they're looking at us and thinking the exact same thing.
It reminds me of Ezekiel, I think it's chapter 20, where it says, I will cause you to pass under the rod, and I will purge out the rebels from among you. And that's relating back to in the Torah, when they would have the sheep pass under the rod, and every 10th one was set apart to Yahweh. And you were not allowed to ask, is this a good one or a bad one? Do I like this one? And do I want to give this one away? Is this one worthy of an offering? Is this one definitely not worthy of an offering? You're not allowed to say any of that. God, why do you want that sheep?
Really?
And, yeah.
I'm also thinking of this. There's a rabbinical take that I've enjoyed reading, and that is to say that Leah, the older sister, was thought to have been given to Esau, and that half of the tribes of Israel were to be sired from Esau and Leah, and the other half between Yaakov and Rachel. That's why Leah's eyes were weak, that she had spent so much time crying at the prospect of being given to Esau that it weakened her eyes, or her eyes were swollen from crying. That when Yaakov took the blessing and had the blessing of Esau and his birthright, it obligated him to take both sisters as brides. So that would have been in the providence of Yah. That would have been Yah's plan all along. But it had to be worked out in the natural so that the plan of Yah could come to pass. So he had to go into exile, not only to find a bride, but the brides. And the understanding is that the bride of the covenant promise, that is Yeshua, is far more complex, far more multifaceted than what we may be aware of. And again, it gives us the understanding of we have to be willing to broaden our scope of understanding as to who we are and all the tribal varieties that we're going to include without being offended by that. So
that's a great thought. That takes me back to what you were saying back in Genesis 28:14, where it says that your seed will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread abroad. That's literally what's used there. The word that's used there literally means that. It means to spread out, to even spread outside of barriers, just to like break out and go out all over the place. That's what it's saying. And so that fulfillment there, he doesn't just say you're just going to be like spread around a little bit. He's literally saying you are going to be spread out to the west, the east, the north, and the south, and all over the place. And in your seed, all the families of the earth will be blessed, meaning your descendants are going to go into all the earth. And that means they're going to look different, going to have some different ideas and thoughts and cultures and different things, even though their identity truly is Israel, though they don't really know that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Barry, but it was like that just took me right back to that when you said that.
I'm also thinking of this in Matthew 3. Yochanan the Immerser, John the Baptist, is coming, and this is his message. Matthew 3, verse 2, repent, for the reign of the heavens has come near. And it's almost like, the old theory of planet X is going to come by so close to the earth that inhabitants of X is going to jump off and land on the earth and that kind of thing. I don't know if you remember that or not, but early 2000s, that was a great preaching tool in conspiracy theory.
Right.
And the kingdom of heaven has come near. Exactly how did that happen? Well, the reality, I read that this morning, and that's that Yeshua is the reign of the heavens. He is the sovereign of the heavens. And he is at hand. He's nearby. So there is this reality check. If you will repent, the kingdom is right here. Well, the process was, he says, the axe is laid to the root of the trees, and if you're not bearing good fruit, you're going to get cut down. He says that his winnowing fork is in his hand. He's going to cleanse his threshing floor. He's going to do this separation. You're talking about the sheep that were being put under the rod. When we talk about the kingdom, when we talk about the bringing of the tribes together, Yaakov, or now becoming Israel, and bringing his family back home, is a prophetic picture of the restoration of the houses of Israel and in Yehuda coming back together, being in the land together. That's a kingdom picture. This is about restoration. The purpose of exile is to separate, but in the process of separations, there's multiplication. So we have division and multiplication in exile. And then you add them back together to a greater whole. It's the picture of cells and the body. They divide and reestablish themselves as separate cells that will divide and establish again. Yah is all about dividing things and then restoring it. That's what's happened in the houses of Am Israel. He's divided us to multiply us and then add us back together. Yeshua says, or Yochanan is preaching and saying, when this one comes who is the reign of the heavens, and he's close by, he's going to sift, he's going to separate, he's going to infuse with fire and the Ruach HaKodesh. You have to repent and present yourselves to the right side of the equation. So Esau is the factor that we have to consider here, in that he comes to oppress, to prevent the processes that Yah is trying to establish. And we can do like Yaakov initially thought, I'm going to appease him with gifts, but ultimately he also prayed, deliver me from him.
Yes. Yes.
Father, deliver me from him, because if he has his way, he will destroy the mother and the children. He will establish the assembly, the mother, and all of the children that are a part, the inhabitants of the assembly. We cannot allow Esau to have his way.
If that would have happened, he would have effectively cut off the line of Israel, not lion, the line, the descendants of
the lineage,
Israel. Yes. Because if we can see this picture in Israel, and it was more than a statement, in Israel is the entire body of the people of Yaakov, the entire embodiment of it. None of the matriarchs or patriarchs by themselves can fulfill the picture of Israel. They all have to work together. And even in Israel, we have the names of all the matriarchs and patriarchs, every one of them. If we take Israel, it's Yod, Sin, Resh, Aleph, Lamed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you take the Yod, we have Israel, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. The Sin is Sarah. The Resh is Rivka and Rachel. The Aleph is Avraham. And the Lamed is Leah. Every one of the matriarchs and patriarchs are in Israel. That's not just a statement. It's literally said by the name itself.
Right.
And so when we can see the picture of all these parts are needed to be one. We understand, when Yaakov wrestled with the angel, this was a battle of identity, not with the angel, with himself. I mean, this was a battle of identity. He was unsure of who he was, and he knew what God said, but was God really going to deliver? He was unsure of himself, and in all of these things. And as Yahweh changed his identity from Yaakov to Israel, he's the same guy, but Yahweh is reconfirming all these promises to him, and it's saying in these promises, you can see everything I'm going to do for you. And I find it very interesting that after his meetup with Esau, which some of the Midrashes state that Esau, which was called Edom, right? That Herod was descended from Edom and Rome was built from Edom. So that's another interesting avenue. But right after he met with him, he went to Shechem, which was the Valley of Decision, so to speak. We have Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal and Shechem, which was right in between the two, which is where Yahweh, when he brought them out of Mitzrayim and into the land, they were supposed to first go to Shechem and set the covenant in place in Shechem, right there.
Yes.
And to proclaim the blessings and the cursings of the covenant right there and stand in between them, where you can see not just the declaration, but the benefits and the results of the blessing and the cursing, and how all these things, to choose which way you're going to go, which path you're going to be set on. So on your return back into the land, and though the struggle with identity, when we come to the realization of who we are, we come to this place of Shechem for ourselves and for our life. And we look at Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, and we're in this valley of decision. I always find that interesting because Shechem also means like between the shoulders, right?
Yes.
And so you have blessing on one shoulder and cursing on the other shoulder. And forgive me for this, Barry, but you remember those old cartoons where you have a devil on the shoulder and an angel on the other?
Yeah.
This has to be where that picture came from.
It has to be. Yeah. A lot of the cartoon writers were indeed Jewish. So, I mean, it would have been within their wheelhouse to think that. I want to take you down a little trail here of difference.
Okay.
You were talking about the one that Yaakov wrestled with was the angel of the Lord, or Yeshua. I have a different take. I believe it was the spirit of Esau. Now, don't throw rocks at me. Just hear me out, folks. Just listen a second. The entity that he wrestled with, I believe, was wrestling with him for the title Israel. That's what Esau really wanted. That's what Yaakov needed. Is the claim to the title Israel, the covenant fulfillment. And when it says that he saw him as the face of Elohim, Elohim can mean the Elohim, or it can mean a mighty one. The end result of the wrestling match is a relinquishing of this Esau's spirit's claim on the title of Israel, and where he confirms, you are Israel. You have wrestled with me. You have prevailed against me. I acknowledge that you are indeed Israel. Another reason that I see this is that Esau's entire temperament went from warfare and annihilation to brokenness and acceptance. And that's because the spiritual battle affected the natural consequence the next morning. how that fits now is that there is a spiritual claim among some congregations. We are Israel. We have the title. We have replaced you. Current world events, however, is exposing the spirit of anti-Semitism even within some of those ranks, not all, but among some. There is a wrestling match taking place right now, the same as with Yaakov, and this, as I said, my belief is the spirit of Esau. But ultimately, there will be the relinquishing of that claim and that title and the reestablishment of the understanding this people is actually Israel. We no longer have any claim or title to that. Just a different take, just a different way of looking at it.
That's a good midrash, and I've read some things along those lines before. The biggest reason why I still hold to the fact that it was probably probably Yeshua, was I didn't think that Esau would be in a place to bless him. You know, you can't give what you don't have, and if he was wanting him to bless him, then well, his dad already gave him that, and then he makes the declaration. He said, "I've seen the face of God. My life has been spared," and he named the place Peniel, which means the face of God. And then he turned and he traveled past Peniel, and then right as he does this, he said that the sun rose upon him as he crossed over, turning his face toward El, turning his face toward Yah. The implication, either way you go with that, is everything that lies ahead is in the hands of God, because that promise of when you come back to the land and you will be this great many people like the stars in the sky, the sand on the seashore, all of this, that hasn't happened yet. He had 12 sons, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not that many. I mean, by our standards today, that's a lot, right?
Right.
But that's not stars in the heaven. That's not sand on the seashore.
Not
so
yet.
he had to trust God in saying that, much like how Isaac had to lay his life down on the altar, saying, okay, but if the promise is going to come through me, through Isaac, how's this going to happen if I end up dying? So if this is going to happen, then God's going to have to resurrect me. And God provided the ram, which we know symbolically lifted him up off of that. But same thing here with Yaakov. If this is the blessing that God himself, I'm the God of your father Abraham, the God of your father Isaac, but he's now at this point of being shown to him, I am your God. Because before he went off, remember, he said, if God is with me, and just basically, I'm going to paraphrase the prayer, give me my daily bread, then I will return to Bethel and I will bless God and I will give him a tithe of everything and everything. Well, Yahweh has given him this and he has increased him, and he's now in the process of bringing him home in a place of restoration. And in the process of returning home and restoration, he has to struggle with Esau. And now that he has met them, now he needs to continue forward into the land.
My last thought on this, David, is that after the match of wrestling, it affected his walk.
Yes.
His walk was forever changed. So ever how we fit in this exile process, ever how we are a part of the inclusion of the tribes, it has to affect our walk. We cannot be as we have been before.
And it was a noticeable difference.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
It wasn't symbolic. It was a noticeable difference. I wonder what his footprints in the sand look like. I digress.
Yes. Well,
maybe
folks,
you should close us out.
We appreciate you tuning in and listening, and we appreciate your comments and questions. So if you'd like to contact us, you can do so at reunionroadmap@B'naiYosefNA.com.